Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fertility Workshop. I am Marcus and I am your host. So today is very exciting. I am going to be talking in this episode all about how do you find the clinic for you? How do you embark on that search? Or if you're already on the journey of IVF, how do you refine it? How do you find something more in line with what you two actually need? So this episode consists of two different parts. One is some tips on how to find the right IVF clinic, the right IVF protocol, the right situation for yourselves as a couple. And then the second part, we're going to be looking at the different options around the world where clinics are in terms of technology, costs, budgets, all those kinds of things. So we're going to go over country by country, great ideas for you. And the whole idea of this episode is to get your brain moving in a way whereby you can better cater for your needs, but of course give you some direction. Because let's face it, it's really hard out there. You've been told you've got to do IVF. What do you do? What do you do? Where do you even begin? So that's a situation we found ourselves in, and quite frankly, I didn't do us proud. I wasn't, in my opinion, I did not carry my weight that I needed to. My wife had to put some bits and pieces together. And then we went around some clinics and it started from there. We didn't know what we needed because half the battle is finding out what works as a protocol for your wife's body. And then the other half is putting together how you can improve your egg quality and sperm health as well. So it's obviously a heck of a trip, guys. Right? It's a big journey. But in this episode, we're going to be talking about how do you find the right clinic for you two as a couple. Before we get into this first part, I am just going to give you a quick summary of what we're going to be looking at so that you have the trajectory of this episode. I don't want you thinking, oh, crumbs, where is this episode going? I want you to know the direction. So here it is. We're going to be looking at, of course, the circumstances affecting both the two of you within your couple. We're going to be looking at donors, how the clinics tackle that question, and the right way to go about it and the wrong way to kind of go about it. What kind of supportive services do clinics provide, and are they going to be applicable to yourselves? What about reviews? How do they deal with embryos? Because embryos are not all the same. Your circumstances might be a lot more dire than someone else's, and therefore a lower quality embryo is going to be very important to you, and you might well want to try it and go ahead with that as well. So all of these little subjects, there's different nuggets of information within all of them, and there will be a little bit more as well. So that is where we're going to start. So let's begin. Circumstances affecting the two of you. Right. So everybody's circumstances are different when they come into IVF. There's a misconception that IVF is just a monolithic kind of ladder that you got to climb, and that's the deal. People who have not done IVF, that's all they know. And that's not the case, because of course it can be a man's problem. It can be the woman's problem. It can be a lot more complicated than that. It can be a combination of both. And if there is an issue with one of the couple, what is the issue? Whatever the condition is, that is going to change the course of the journey massively. And if you want to save the most amount of time that you can and the most amount of money, then knowing your roadmap as soon as possible and accelerating that journey is, of course, in your interest. Now, I'm going to go over different things that can affect you and your wife's journey, and maybe you'll identify with some of these situations. So, for example, your wife, how old is she? Can she actually conceive naturally? Has she had surgeries before? Does she have a low ovarian reserve? Does she have endometriosis? Does she have PCOS? Are there other things involved? Are there other complications? Are there cysts? Are there polyps? There's a whole range of things that could be there. And it's important to know whichever IVF clinic you approach that they have experience in dealing with challenging circumstances. And what about if it's the man is the primary issue, right? We often speak about the man being the problem, the woman being the problem. We know that men and women can make up somewhat for the fertility of the other. So it's always going to be a joint journey. But often we get very hung up on the primary quote unquote problem. And if the man is having issues, then what are the issues? Are the sperm markers low? Is the DNA fragmentation of the sperm the problem? Do you need micro-TESE procedures? Do you need TESE procedures? Are there genetic problems? Is there a blockage or a hormonal imbalance? You know, there's a whole range of things that it could be. It could be that you took steroids, or you've done testosterone replacement therapy, and now since you've started that, you're actually thinking, crikey, I really want to have kids. Actually, I didn't see this coming, but now that's something that we want to do. So, life changes, twists and turns, right? So which clinics can best accommodate your needs? So let's start off if the woman is having fertility issues. How do you go about it? How do you start selecting a clinic that is going to support the two of you? Well, the woman is often focused on a lot in IVF. And so there's a lot of clinics out there who are not only equipped, but specialize in dealing with challenging situations. So it can be as blatantly obvious as the fact that when you go on their website and you're checking them out, they can have a low ovarian reserve package, a specialist package for you. And you can click on that, you can see what's going on there. And straight off the bat, you know that that's what they deal with. If it's a man, well, let's look at if they are actually able to do ICSI. Most clinics will do ICSI now, that's pretty commonplace. But do they go the extra mile? Do they go into invasive, non-invasive surgical procedures? What are those? There's TESI, TESA, and micro-TESI. And I'm going to do a separate episode on these with a doctor so that they're discussed in full, so that you guys know that if your situation is dire, there's always going to be something else that you can do. And essentially these three surgeries, they vary differently, but essentially they look to take sperm directly from the testicles before they're stored in somewhere called the epidermis, which is the storage chamber for ready sperm. And within that storage chamber, unfortunately, they are very susceptible to heat, to oxidative stress, to a variety of different things, infections, somewhat. So what they do is they do these surgeries to go straight into the testes, take out optimal sperm, and therefore avoid any degradation of the sperm quality through the epididymis. So that is a rough explanation. But what you need to know is if your sperm is that dire, I hope that they would have approached and spoken to you about it when you've been diagnosed with fertility problems. And so you already know you need to search for that. So with that being said, do the clinics provide these surgeries? Are the doctors able to do them? Are they specialists? That's what you're going to need to search for. Do they provide DNA fragmentation tests? Do they provide oxidative stress tests as well for your sperm? These will provide another level of diagnosing what's the issue with your sperm. And the more information you have, the more you can do about it. And kind of hand in hand with those two details about whether the obvious signs from the website, whether they accommodate or how they accommodate each individual, the man and the woman, there'll most likely be statistics on that website that will give you an indication of how reliable their service is. So often they like to throw out their stats on their website and they'll say, okay, if you do one IVF cycle, let's say fresh cycle with us, with one embryo implantation, you'll have a 62% chance in having a baby. These are the stats they love to record. And because it's essentially their marketing, right? That's how they get clients, by showing off their great stats. And it's a double-edged sword, and I'll get to that in a moment. But they are where you want to begin. Now, they could have other stats that they show, which is for every 3 IVF cycles we do, each one providing an embryo transfer, there's a 91% chance you'll get pregnant. So they'll measure it in different ways. In fact, they'll gloss it up how whatever best suits their advertising, but they will give you an indication of what their goals are and how they essentially help you create life. And it's really worth taking note of that information, because if they're used to taking in challenging circumstances and they're projecting good stats, that's really, really, it's a fantastic sign. Let's not kid ourselves, guys, right? That's something that we would jump to, right? But I do want to go over something that I'll expand a little bit more on later on about our individual experience. But there are cases whereby IVF clinics, they have minimum thresholds of fertility. So you'll need to ensure that you're on some kind of fertility level. Therefore, they'll accept you because it's not too low. And therefore, you'll take part in the IVF process and you'll have success. And the issue with them having minimum thresholds that are quite rigid is that and the reason why they do it is because they're specifically for marketing purposes. So if you're only a little bit subfertile, they accept you because you've been having problems. And then after one cycle, you have a successful baby. That's their dream because now they can put that up as a stat. But the problem is that it was never really a challenging case to begin with. So it can be a double-edged knife, but it is, as I say, a good indicator of their quality if you know that they take on demanding cases, demanding patients, customers, whatever you want to call us. Because unfortunately, guys, we are seen as, we pay for this service in the private sector. So we are seen as their income. Important not to forget that. It will influence your decision-making process. But that's not this episode. I will get to that another time. If I haven't already, because we've got lots of previous episodes that have been speaking about it. So next, I am just going to cover donors. Now, a lot of people, when we're talking about sperm donors, egg donors, it's not for some people. For some people, they don't mind. And often, if you're like us, for example, you'll find that at first you weren't really that enamored with the idea, but the more you think about it, the more it's not such a big deal. But there is a time and place for it. I remember when we did our first cycle in the UK, cost us an arm and leg. I always say that just because, it seems crazy now how much we paid, because I know how much we pay in Europe, and, we can get 3 cycles for the cost of one in the UK. But again, we'll go onto that in a moment. And we had our first egg collection. Off the top of my head, I think we had 3 embryos or 3 eggs rather, that didn't fertilize, and they all failed. And they came out and they said, yeah, I think you guys should consider donor eggs. And I was like, at first I was like, I had a few different thoughts. I had, well, is it that bad? Is it that bad that, our situation that we just need to go straight to donor eggs? And then I thought to myself, this is crazy. We only tried one time and they're already telling us this. And then I thought to myself, do you know what? I haven't even had the opportunity to fight for my children. Unfortunately, that thought process took hold, and we started investigating other clinics, etc., etc. We found a way. We have multiple embryos in storage now, cryo storage. So a heck of a thing to be told that right at the beginning of your journey. And then the next year, you're already freezing embryos, So there's a time and a place for it. If you are coming towards the end of your energy levels for IVF, absolutely consider it. But if it's right from the beginning, you might not necessarily want to do that, especially take into account that you can improve egg quality, you can improve sperm quality. So again, it'll be based on your own situation and your own judgment. Before we carry on, if you're trying to improve your fertility and don't know where to start, go and check out our website. We've put together a set of free tools to give you clear direction, including a breakdown of the top supplements for sperm health inside our supplement blueprint video guide. There are also free sessions you can join where we walk through things properly and answer common questions in live Q&As. And we also run the Sperm Analysis Mastery session, where you learn how to actually read your results, understand what they mean, and what you can do next. If you want to stop guessing and just get that clarity, head to thefertilityproject.life. I'll see you there. Next, we're going to come to embryos. This is a really important part, especially for those of you who have already been in the game, or those of you who are expecting poor embryo quality. Now, there's 2 things that I want to talk about with embryos. We all hope to get quality embryos, high quality embryos. They're not all one and the same. People don't know that, generally speaking, until they go through this journey. So I will cover off what is good, what is bad, what is something to consider, etc., etc. But we all hope to get these quality embryos. But the truth is, sometimes they just don't happen. And it can be to do with egg quality, sperm quality, a variety of different things, conditions, genetic or otherwise. And it's important to be informed and prepared. So let's start off with the basics. What makes a good embryo and what makes a bad one? And by the way, we're not going to get too technical in this episode. I am going to go over in another episode into more detail. Now, the high quality embryo, that is represented by something called an AA grading. An AA grading. And a low quality embryo will be DD. So what do these 2 letters actually mean? So there's 2 parts to the embryo actually. One is what will become the placenta, and one is what will become the baby. They're both very, very important, and they both need to be as high quality as possible. Because if the placenta is very high quality, that means nutrition, blood, etc., will all flow into the baby as needed and will affect the child's development. And of course, the latter is the child itself. And that will, of course, define the health of the baby. Miscarriage chances will be affected. And of course, stillbirth will also be indicated by a poorer quality embryo. So there's all this information that comes from just these things. So you have AA, BB, CC, DD. DD is not generally able to be used. I mean, that is a low quality embryo. Now, if you have AB, BA, BB, these are kind of, I mean, the AB ones are still high quality embryos. We've got one of those. And still very, very viable, very, very viable. And you've got to understand that these embryos, as they grow, they can self-correct. And that's the kind of crux of what we're talking about. The AB, that's AB is still very good quality. BB, that's mid. CC, that's lower quality, right? But all of these embryos will have the opportunity to grow, to become healthy. And if there are faults within it, they can self-correct and become a healthy baby at the end of it. There is a low percentage chance if it's CC, but it can still happen. And it's really important that you hear me on this, because if you are not used to or expecting high quality embryos, that means that you can't afford to waste and lose any of the CC embryos. Different clinics will have different viewpoints on this, and it's very important to discuss it with them, because sometimes they see a CC embryo and they say, do you know what, we'd rather not implant that because we don't know what's going to happen. High likelihood of the baby not working out, of miscarriage. So actually, we're going to just, we're going to bin it. We're not going to put it on the table as an option. And there are circumstances where you might not be getting much healthier embryos throughout the journey of your IVF journey. So you don't want to waste those. And the thing is, a lot of these clinics, they might not talk to you about it beforehand. And so what they'll report after an egg collection, after they're fertilized, they'll just say, yeah, we had some success with the eggs being fertilized, but unfortunately the embryo was not viable, and so we had to discard it. You'll often get this as a generic explanation of what's happened within the few days of the egg and the sperm coming together, then fertilizing, then becoming a embryo over the next few days. So there's that, the fact that it wasn't seen as a viable embryo because the quality of the embryo was too low. And there's also something called mosaic embryos. Now, what are mosaic embryos and why are they important? Well, first of all, they're important because they both can be very viable and they can self-correct as well. But what is a mosaic embryo? Because obviously that's quite unique. Well, what it is an embryo that is a combination of normal and abnormal cells detected on testing. And so they can be imperfect, but often they can self-correct, which means that they shouldn't be discarded. They should be given a shot, given a chance. Those are your babies. Not just that, your options might not be broad. So it's important to speak to your clinic beforehand, or the clinic that you're thinking of using, and just ask, what's your policy on mosaic embryos? What's your policy on what makes an embryo viable or not? Is a CC something that you'd feel comfortable implanting into my wife, into a uterine wall? And you'll be surprised. You'll get various different answers. They won't all be, oh yeah, it's fine, we'll definitely keep them. And then you can make the judgment call at the time. They might say, do you know what, with mosaic embryos, we don't deal with those. We will not entertain them as viable embryos. And that can seriously harm your chances of conceiving. You're going through IVF for a reason. You have a demanding situation as it is. So to discard and throw away options, you don't want to do that. And we're not going to go into it, but there is genetic testing. You can look for disease, illness, for example, and you can also look at chromosomal abnormalities and things to ensure that it will be a healthy baby, etc. But at least give yourself the option, my friends. Do you understand? It's your judgment call. It's your path, your journey. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're just told, yeah, the embryo wasn't viable, so we couldn't go ahead. Because you'll be left feeling confused with no explanation as to why it wasn't viable. And now that you've heard this, and let's say you don't take my advice and you don't talk to them about mosaic embryos, you'll be thinking about what could have been. So don't live in regret. Talk to your clinic before you go ahead with your IVF cycle. Okay, so there's a couple of things that I want to talk about, and that is the supportive services, and then how to look at the reviews for a clinic, how to best utilize them to ensure that you know you're going in a direction that you feel comfortable with and one that you actually feel quite optimistic about. So, supportive services, why are these important? Now, these might not be something that you're thinking of, but they can be the game changers. What do I mean? Well, first of all, do they provide an out of hours contact number? And what does that mean? Typically, IVF clinics in Europe will operate from 8 to 5, 8 to 4, 9 to 5, 9 to 6, right? And when you're taking medication, or your wife's taking medication, her protocol, she'll be injecting herself before these hours and after hours. And if you're suddenly have an issue come up, and I'll illustrate that in just a moment with a couple of my examples, and you don't know what to do, what are you going to do? Here's one of the examples. So 1 year ago, my wife and I, we were at the same clinic that we had used the previous year. We were using the same medication, and we thought we were all good. We thought we knew everything. However, the administrator who was dealing with us was not the same as the previous year, and quite frankly, not as good. But we only found that out a bit later. So she gave us the medication at the clinic. We purchased it. We took it home. We stored it in the fridge as we should, etc., etc. When it came to 7:30 that night, we were to apply it. We went about applying it. What went wrong? Well, the syringe needle was completely different. It was very large, and the way to inject it was different. It wasn't the same as the previous syringe. And so we had to navigate using that, and we did have questions during that process, to the point where my wife was, because she hates needles, she was freaking out about it. And we actually had to go to a pharmacy, find the kind of the needle for the syringe, a shorter one that wasn't quite as invasive or long, because the other one that we just purchased was really long. We couldn't believe it. And then we had to change and use that. But as a result, we injected the medication an hour and a half later. And you might be thinking, well, why don't you guys just do it? You seem pedantic. But I'm going to be honest, it was an irrational fear of my wife's, and there wasn't anything to be done about it. And I'm generally the one injecting the needle into my wife because she doesn't like it. And so that was a situation that came up. And having an out of hours contact number to talk things through, they might have been able to guide us to inject it without going through that panic, etc. And then the next day we went back and we exchanged the medication that we had to the other model, which they had in stock. So I don't know why we got given the alternative ones. And because the surprise wasn't welcome, I can tell you that much. So there was that. And another example, which was really good, of when we did have an out of hours contact number, was when we were doing it in the UK. I didn't realize, because I was injecting my wife. As I said, I'm doing that, and I'm happy to take on that role. And you inject over the course of 2 weeks this medication, and you generally put it into the tummy where there's a bit of fat, or the leg. And we had been instructed to put it into the tummy only. Okay, fine. I was doing it, but I found as I was doing it, it was become more and more difficult every day. You have to change from the left side of the belly to the right side of the belly each day and keep finding new locations. But my wife was bruising very much, like a lot, and there was clearly swelling. And it was becoming so hard. I remember I was injecting one of them, and I was really having to force down. I felt really unsure about it, but I was really having to push down the syringe, and I applied so much force. Well, it was a combination of me applying force, not me actually like driving it into the stomach, me pushing down that bit at the end of the syringe, and then also the fact that there was so much resistance on the needle itself that the needle came off the syringe, and the medication is sprayed a little bit onto my wife, but a lot of it into my eyeball. And I was like, I couldn't see. If you get any liquid in there, you can't see for a bit. And I was panicking. I was like, what the hell's in this thing, etc., etc. So we called up the out of hours line. There was a nurse on the end of it. She spoke to us. She assured me that there was nothing bad in my eyeball. She explained what had happened, the fact that there was a lot of swelling that can happen within the stomach of the woman when doing these injections, and that we needed to simply apply another dose because we weren't able to inject really anything. And we would order more medication the next day because we still had enough medication, fortunately, for the next few days. And they, sent it priority delivery, and it was all fine. So that's how an out of hours contact number can be useful. All right. A long-winded explanation, but that is something that you can value. Something else that you can value is counseling. Now, I'm not one for counseling. I believe that, you can have a good therapist and a bad therapist, and it's hard to find who's good, who's bad. And it takes time to discover that fact anyway. But we did have a very positive experience, again, within that same IVF clinic, that first IVF cycle that we were doing, which is that they provided a free counseling session. And in that counseling session, they were able to address certain questions, address certain emotions, and draw it out in a healthier way. Because we've all had moments in our relationship where we've expressed something honestly and openly, but for some reason it's not taken in the best way, right? And you're like, what the hell did I say wrong? But it's often because we're not phrasing things intentionally and not doing it in a constructive way. And that can be a problem for your relationship during a very stressful time. Your wife will be taking a lot of hormones. It will affect her mood. You will also have stress on your back. So having these counseling sessions, it can be beneficial. And you have the benefit of understanding that you're at a point where you can foresee certain things happening now. We're planning your IVF cycles, right? And if you know that your wife is going to have a hard time, particularly during this time, like it means a lot to, you will just get a sense of it, and that she will be A, receptive, and B, benefit from couples counseling, or whether it be by herself, whatever it is that you two want to do, because you might well want counseling yourself. Never write it off. So understand that that is a valuable tool as well. You don't necessarily have to do it through the clinic or anything like that. Sometimes they offer it, sometimes they don't. Maybe you can do it outside. These are just ideas, guys. So these supportive services, again, very important. To all the men looking to transform their fertility, this is where you stop playing the guessing game. We've built a course with you in mind called Male Fertility Mastery. It's for men who want real change, not more information and not just more noise. It's based upon my 4-year journey improving my own sperm health, and it's grounded in evidence-based fertility research. It shows you how to improve your sperm health over a 3-month period across all your key markers: count, motility, morphology, DNA fragmentation, the whole lot. No fluff, no bullshit, no jumping between random supplements, no wasting time on things that don't move the needle. It has practical steps you can follow and track. It's all about your results. And if you want more direct support, there's coaching available as well. If you're ready to take control and actually fix this, go to thefertilityproject.life/MFM course. Next thing, weekend access. Weekend access. Why is this important? Weekend access to what? Weekend access to the clinic. Because again, if you haven't gone through this process, you will not know that they do not know when the egg collection day will be. And the optimal egg collection day might fall on the weekend. What do you do? Well, they'll say, don't worry about it. It's okay. The optimal day is Saturday, but we will do the egg collection on the Monday. But the reality is it's not the peak time. So some clinics do provide weekend access. For example, in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia, they just seem to have a different working timetable, to be honest with you. They do have weekend access. Also, they accommodate holidays, which is also very important. If you're doing this at Christmas time or around the Christmas time, where lots of staff are taking holidays, etc., that can be a bit of a nightmare. But in Malaysia, they, despite having a lot of holidays, they do actually work them. They make sure they have enough staff in. So that's really important. And they also take that approach to the weekends. In Europe, they do not. As far as I've experienced, they have not. So that's always something to bear in mind as well. If you're, for example, in the UAE, if you're in Dubai, India, if you're in between continents, if you're coming from Africa, then you've got an option of where to fly to and do your IVF. You won't all be from the UK like me, where Europe is kind of across the pond. So you do it there. You'll do it based on the best clinic for you. So just bear that in mind as a little pointer. And lastly, we've got information and communication. This is so important. This comes only second to the fact that they have the facilities themselves to do and the expertise to do the egg collection, to do the whole IVF process. Communication is so important because without it, your questions won't be answered. You've got a lot of money riding on the cycle. This can feel like something that you're only going to do a few times in your lifetime. You've only got a few shots at this. And if people are dropping the ball, it's going to be horrible. So often different clinics will have different ways of dealing with their patients, their customers. They might be using WhatsApp, which is usually pretty useful. They might have their own app whereby they upload documents to, and they also have you'll have direct communication with your coordinator. Again, really good, really important. Sometimes they'll just go through email, and email is slow, cumbersome, and personally, it's not my favorite way of doing things. But you'll find that, well, specifically clinics that have they're more of a quote unquote budget option. Although everything that we've ever done has, we've only been clinics that we're happy with at a high quality. Email is often used. Next, reviews. Reviews. This is like your main weapon to identify whether a clinic is good and responsible. They'll have testimonials on their website most of the time. If their website is not presenting information, I've had a few clinics like that, and it's not showing themselves off or giving you clear-cut information on the first time that you're coming into contact with their clinic digitally, then you got to ask some questions about whether they're going to be a good clinic for you. Because if they can't prioritize their own marketing, which is key, it's probably more important than the actual facilities they do to running a business, and they can't put the care into it, what about their clinic? And there's just some clinics that just have, really poor marketing, although their clinic's exceptionally good. That can happen. But it's a dice roll, especially if you're looking to get IVF abroad and you won't have the opportunity to check out the facilities before you commit. So yeah, take what you can from the website. But if we're looking at the reviews, which typically I recommend you go to just find, look at their Google reviews. Don't rely on Facebook reviews that they publish or their testimonials on their website. You want to get the ones that aren't controlled, right? So you look at the Google reviews and you'll see a variety of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 star. Typically, you're going to see, depending on how established the clinic is in terms of how long it's been doing its services for, you might well find that there's 50 reviews or 200 reviews. And again, it's typical to find that they have 4.5 to 4.9 stars, right? This number alone does not guarantee that one is going to be better than the other. Usually you have to read, I would suggest 10 to 20 minutes, take 10 to 20 minutes per clinic that you're checking out and that you like the look of, and look through those reviews. You'll be able to identify trends of what they're doing good and what they're doing bad. So what trends could there be? If there's multiple mentions of the fact that you're switching between doctors during your cycle, are you happy with that? If you've built trust and established trust with one doctor, and then for some reason you find yourself flipping over to another one, are you going to be happy with that? Most people are not. What about poor communication with the coordinator? Is that coming up a lot? What about after paying your actual money to the clinic, you found that the level of their communications went down? That's a common one. You can see that come up. They say it in a 5-star review. They might say it in a 2-star review. The reason why 5-star reviews, even if there are faults along the way, are 5-star is because there's been success. Because people are so grateful for the successful pregnancy, for the successful embryo transfer, the fact that they've gotten to 5 months pregnant and they've gotten to that point. They're so happy. They will give a 5-star review, but they will also mention a few things that they could have done better. So it's important to read all of them. It's tempting just to read the 2 and 1 stars, although that's a bit of a trap because, they sometimes it's a 1 star simply because there was multiple failures, 2 failures with the clinic. And that's not necessarily the clinic's fault. It can be, of course, but unfortunately failures do happen. And when people are feeling low, they can just leave a damning review. But again, you have to use your own judgment and you have to take what they say in the text seriously. So what other kind of red flags, if you like, would be there. Was English proficiency a problem if you're doing it abroad? Were the doctors cold, unfriendly? That can come up. Late diagnosis of a problem. Yeah, that's something that doesn't come up too much, but I have seen it, and that scares me because people go into the IVF for the first time and they've been told, oh, the problem is with the man or the problem is with the woman. If the problem is with the woman and they've never got checked out themselves, they go ahead on the day of the egg collection, they provide their sperm sample for the first time and they find out it's crap. And then they have to try and make embryos with that. And there's no success. So why wasn't there a test suggested to that man before going ahead with the cycle, so that he can improve his sperm quality, so that he can look at alternative procedures that would be more in line with what he needs. That can come up. And there are, of course, trends whereby multiple people might say, do you know what? I felt like I was on a conveyor belt, just in, out, dismissed, told to do this, very instructional, very cold. And I felt like I was just on a conveyor belt, and it was very business run. It didn't feel like a caring clinic. It just felt like they wanted my money. They were money hungry. So do take the time to look through the reviews of any of the clinics that you're checking out. This is going to be one of the biggest decisions of your life. You won't regret making the effort. Okay, so we're coming up to the second part of this episode. And this part is going to be looking at different countries, what their opportunities are, why you would choose them, why you would travel abroad to do an IVF cycle. Because let's face it, it's going to be for some people, not for others. If two people are extremely career orientated and they're not willing to take a holiday to another country to do things there, then you'll probably have to just pay somewhere which is more local. Not necessarily better, not necessarily cheaper, just somewhere more local. But for those of us looking to maximize our chances, to do as many cycles as we can with the budget that we have, traveling for IVF makes a lot of sense. And before we go any further, I do want to quickly just suggest that all these numbers have to be taken with a pinch of salt. They are generic and meant to be used as a guideline. You must investigate and do more, and of course, get quotes from the clinics you're looking at. And then also, I 100% recommend that you look to understand in the country that you're approaching, what's the terms of use, if you like, of your embryo. Will they always require mutual consent? Or does only one person, i.e. the mother, need consent? What happens if one of you dies? What happens if you get a divorce? Bear that in mind. But with no further ado, let's look at the first, United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is, in terms of my story, that's where of course we started our journey. And it's a very expensive place. We did an IVF cycle that cost £12,000. That did not include medication. Medication for us cost £2,500. And there were other extras, traveling to London on the train, etc. For two people, cost a lot. And, you have lunch in London, can cost a little bit. All these things just kind of add up. And that's why we look to look into Europe. Now, if you're looking at IVF clinics in the UK, you don't have to pay £12,000. Bear in mind that your needs for medication, your protocols, they'll vary depending on your situation, how much medication you need, how high the dosages are, etc. We ourselves typically need quite a lot. So, as I said, your situation will change that. But then also, do you remember I was talking about statistics and how thresholds can be like the gatekeeping in terms of who can take part in an IVF clinic? That can essentially help you identify whether the clinic's success stats are meaningful or not. Because if they're only taking people in who are a bit subfertile and then they have lots of success because actually they're pretty fertile, those stats don't really mean anything to you who might have a more demanding process. But if you're only a bit subfertile, then perhaps this is a clinic that you can look for yourself. Something else to be aware of as well is that when you have same-sex couples, they can have a lot more success than the average one. I don't know. I was about to say the average heterosexual couple, because usually if you're going to IVF as a heterosexual couple, there's an issue there. Whereas for same-sex couples, they're literally doing it because they can't do it themselves. So if there's two women, for example, they'll need a sperm donor and they'll do it through an IVF clinic. There's nothing wrong with the woman's fertility. There's nothing wrong with the sperm donation. In fact, it's been chosen because it's been identified as really good sperm, and then they have success. You know what I mean? And for the men, then you have a surrogate. And it's the same situation that no one is infertile there. It's just that they're doing an artificial method of getting pregnant because they don't have the biological equipment within their couple to essentially have a baby. So I'm sure you all know that, but I'm just saying that these things can affect the stats. These things can affect the statistics of a clinic. So that's why it's very important to, when you look at the statistics, that you take a common sense approach, a broad-minded approach, and you understand the client base of the clinic. How can you do that? There might just simply be lots of images of, same-sex couples on the website. They target the LGBT community. But we ourselves, we paid, as I said, £12,000 with medication. Very expensive, very expensive. Now, before we go any further, I'm just going to look at the ones that are commonly thought of for IVF. A lot of people go to Spain for IVFs. A lot of people go for Portugal. And these, although were seen as an option in the past, they are now pretty expensive. So for Portuguese, I think at a minimum, you will start at €4,000, and typically you'll find yourself working up towards €6,000. That's pretty expensive. And you're probably thinking, well, Marcus, this is a hell of a lot cheaper than £12,000. Yes, I understand that it is cheaper. The issue is that you do have to live there. So you have to travel, pay the rent, eat your food, do what you want to do. And it might work out in comparison to the UK much cheaper. Spain as well. You look at IVF cycles there, you're probably looking between 4,500 to 7,000 euros there, depending on the clinic. And medication is also pretty expensive for both of these countries. So you're looking between 1,000 and 1,800 pounds typically. And just so you know, guys, if you are eventually going to use donor eggs, I would say that the additional cost would range from 2,000 to 4,000 euros/pounds on top of whatever the typical IVF cycle would be. And when I say the IVF cycle, just to clarify, I didn't mention it at the beginning, I apologize. I'm talking about one fresh IVF cycle, not frozen, no cryo storage costs involved, just a fresh cycle that includes a consultancy appointments regarding your protocol, looking at egg collection, and then also embryo transfer. So that's the set menu. That's what we're looking at. I'm just going to quickly go over France and Germany just to illustrate that they're not the best options. And France is a little bit funny because they provide subsidies for their citizens. So, if you're just glancing around at France, you might get a little bit confused. But for private patients, international patients, you'll be paying between 4,500 and 7,500. And medication, again, will be similar to Spain, between €1,000, €1,600. Donor IVF is, again, it's going to have that uplift cost of around 2,000 to 4,000 euros. Germany's a really interesting one, and there's a lot of German people looking for IVF outside of Germany. And the reason why is because A, it's expensive. It's between 4,000 and 6,000 euros. You've got medication costs that are the highest in Europe, 2,000 to 4,000 euros. And also, donor eggs are not available. Donor eggs are not available in Germany. So I want to talk about somewhere that is often seen as an option. And indeed ourselves, we have gone over there to check out clinics, and that is Greece. I haven't looked at Cyprus, but Cyprus is also an option. I encourage you to look there as well in your own time. But these numbers won't be representative of Cyprus, they're representative of Greece. And you will have the cost of between 3,500 to 5,000 euros there. Medication there, again, is pretty expensive. It's about 1,000 to 2,000 euros. So again, it's not all about cost, is it? You can think about to yourself, how do I make this month, how do I make this journey as pleasurable as possible, as stressless as possible? I can take a holiday in Greece. We can do things, etc. So there is that to think about as well. If you're going through IVF and feeling the pressure of choosing the right clinical protocol or questioning whether the path you're actually on is right for you, this is where we can help. We run IVF pathfinding sessions, a focus session where we guide you through your options based on your specific situation. We've been through IVF ourselves. We've reviewed clinics and understand how much approaches, standards, and outcomes can vary. This is about helping you choose or adjust your path with clarity before moving forward. Whether you want to explore alternative options, make sure your current plan actually makes sense for you, or find something that better fits your budget, medical history, or goals, we take all of it into account. If you want to feel more confident in your next steps, head to thefertilityproject.life and drop us a message through the contact page. Next, we're going to talk about Czech Republic. Now, Czech Republic, we have got a lot of experience in, and we're not happy to recommend any clinic that we specifically used. I know a lot of people are wanting that, but we simply cannot do that because we've had issues in a number of different clinics. We haven't found a perfect clinic. So, cost, let's start off with that. It will range from 2,500 euros to 4,500 euros. Typically, you'll find them around 3,200 euros, I'd say. It's pretty easy to find those. And again, they will all vary in what they're happy to do or not. But what I would say is that the healthcare practice in Czech Republic is very high. Everything is of a good quality. Medication costs are also low. You'll pay between 700 to 1,500 pounds. That's just a general guideline. But us there, for example, what we did there, we did a dual stimulation cycle, I guess you'd call it, a dual stimulation package. And that includes 2 egg transfers. The embryos then get put into cryo storage. And however many you have in cryo storage, you'll then choose from those. And then you'll do an embryo transfer a month later based on whichever one of those embryos you want to implant. And it includes all of that. So that's essentially 2 egg collections and 1 embryo transfer. And that cost us approximately 4,500 euros. So if you think about what we were paying in the UK, 12,000, both of these are excluding medication, of course, then you can see actually with this dual stimulation package, we're getting about 2 cycles for 4,500 euros. The medication cost us approximately 600 per cycle. So that's 5,100. You're looking at the raw costs, probably, 1 to 3. Now, of course, it's not quite as straightforward as that because you have to find somewhere to live temporarily in the Czech Republic. And Prague is quite expensive now. I've got to say, the first time we went, it seemed very affordable. Second time we went, not at all. So there is that to take into account. The city that you choose in the Czech Republic would be more expensive or cheaper than others. So again, swings and roundabouts there. And if you're not looking to do dual stimulation, because that is very specific, that is only going to be really open to you if you're willing to either fly back and forth from whichever country you're coming from. So I'm aware that a lot of people listening to this will be from the States, Canada, etc. So it's not a one size fits all, obviously. But if you're not able to do multiple flights, or if you're not looking to be able to kind of stay in Czech Republic for a couple of months, for example, then dual stimulation won't be for you. I think with the clinic that we used, it was around 2,700 euros for a fresh embryo transfer. And I was very happy with their facilities. The first dual stimulation we did then was an absolute dream. We had a fantastic coordinator. The following year, unfortunately, the service wasn't consistent. So that's a bit of our insight. Next, I'm going to talk about Slovakia, which is right next to the Czech Republic. Of course, they used to be one country. So why am I mentioning Slovakia? It's a bit further out, and I am going to go into the Baltics in a moment. But the reason why I want to mention Slovakia is that there are IVF clinics there that will do it for as little as 1,440 euros, which is very, very affordable. Now, what are their minimum requirements? What kind of facility can you have? What standard of care will you receive? All this kind of varies. I would say on the whole that the range is from about 1,450. That's one clinic that I found and I intend to investigate more of, because what a fantastic option. It opens up a lot of options for a lot of people who would otherwise not be able to have a child, to 3,000, around 3,500, 800 euros. That's the range. So, and again, medication there is similar to Czech Republic. It's around 600, 1,200 euros you would typically pay. As I said, we have a very high dosage of medication, and we were basically paying about 650 euros per a cycle. So these numbers, again, take them with a pinch of salt because they cover a range of different clinics. And again, they're kind of conservative and ensuring that all bases are covered. And again, Slovakia doesn't seem like they have bad reviews at all. So again, check them out as an option. Think about how many cycles you can do in order to maximize your chances. That's the maths. But you must also marry that up with what your wife is happy to go through, because these cycles are very emotionally demanding. And if you're constantly doing them back to back, I don't know how some women do it. I think they really are warriors, and we won't ever know how it feels to be, to have such aggressive mood swings, etc. Or at least I don't think the majority of us will. So that's and it's a trial that they have to go through themselves as much as you can support them, and I do talk about that. But ultimately, they have to go through that journey. Now, I do want to go over the Baltics, and I am going to go over other countries around Greece. So let's fire away with the Baltics. When I say the Baltics, what do I mean? First of all, that means Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. For those of you who don't know too much about these countries, know that they are more affordable. English is, in Estonia, English is amazing, and you won't have any communications issues there. And Lithuania and Latvia, from what I understand, is all the professional staff there, they are going to be fluent in English, because of course, how could they cater to anybody if they are not? So let's look at these and let's look at how much they're going to cost. So Estonia is going to be the more expensive one out of the three, and you will see it be similar prices to the Czech Republic. I think from what I found, it's between 2,800 to 4,000 euros. Medication there is perhaps a touch more expensive, but pretty much the same, looking at around 800 euros upwards. And then when you're looking at donor eggs, etc., you have to take into account their individual quotes, generally around 2,000 euros, a bit higher than just a normal fresh cycle. Lithuania, you're looking at around 2,500 to 3,500. And Latvia, just a bit cheaper than Estonia, 2,800, 3,800. Estonia, looking at around, as I said, around that 3,000 euro mark to 4,000 euro mark. So I do often kind of lump those three together, but they are individually different. The issue with these ones, the IVF clinics that I find in that area, is that their websites aren't particularly good, and finding information on them can be a lot harder. It is worth noting that a lot of people from the Nordic region, Finland, Norway, Sweden, they do travel over to the Baltics to get a more affordable cycle done. So it's not as if they don't have, they're not open to international patients. Indeed, before all the problems with Russia, that was also a big source of their patients, clientele. And then you also had Ukraine, etc. So it's not as if they're not worth mentioning, but it's just hard sometimes to find websites, etc. on there. Definitely worth exploring. Give it a look. They have catered to international patients, as I said, for a long time, but you'll need to do some research there. I unfortunately didn't have too much success. Also want to give a mention to Poland. Poland is quite similar to Czech Republic in terms of standards, but they are a little bit more costly. So I was saying that what we had paid for, or what was available to us, was around 2,500 euros to 3,500 euros, generally speaking, from clinic to clinic in Prague. In Poland, it would be a little bit more expensive. So you'd be looking at starting out at around 3,300, 3,400 euros upwards. So just bear that in mind. But they have a very strong IVF industry, if you like. And that sector there is something that they take very seriously. So they have very high standards. I'm just going to give Italy a quick mention. It's pretty expensive there as well, around 4,000 euros to 8,000. Then there's premium clinics there as well. Clinics will vary. Medication, looking at around 800 euros to 1,500 euros. So just bear that in mind. Now, Croatia, really important one, Croatia. I appreciate there's quite a list here, but I'm going to give you all that information so that you can make the best decision about what you're going to do in Europe. Croatia has some fantastic IVF clinics available, and they are, again, quite affordable. So they will start out around 2,500, and they will go higher upper range is going to be around €4,500. It really depends which clinic you pick out. And medication, again, is very affordable there, between €700 per cycle, I would say, to 1,300. And I mention them because I know that there are IVF clinics that do a lot of advanced procedures. So what do I mean? And what am I talking about? I'm talking about the introduction of third-party material into IVF. So there are sometimes issues with mitochondria in the egg, in the follicle. And so what they can do, for example, is they can take mitochondria from a third party with minimal DNA imprints, and they can take the old mitochondria out of the egg that wasn't very good, and inject it with the third party mitochondria, allowing that egg the best chance, maximizing the chances for it to grow and to become a fetus. So that is something quite phenomenal. And in fact, that was first done in the UK in Newcastle, but they have and that was done in 2024. So they've been able to replicate and start doing that in Croatia. They did it I think they started last year, the clinic that I'm talking about. But that's just a little bit of information for you. Croatia is both affordable and they have cutting edge services as well. And lastly, I'm just going to mention Serbia again, that there are great options there. €2,500, starting from that to €4,000. And medication is probably the lowest in the region from what I found. It starts, medication can start from €500 to €1,000 per cycle. So that is Europe covered, guys. And you'll be pleased to know that this is a two-part episode. And I'll be going over a lot of countries that will be relevant to different people around the world. So we're going to be looking at Latin America, Mexico. We're going to be looking at India, Southeast Asia, Nigeria, Kenya, and other places around the world that are very well established. We don't want to go into the ones in the US. Quite frankly, if you're in the US and you can afford it, just go ahead and do your thing. These episodes are more about maximizing your budget. And if that is a concern of yours, that's probably why, a big part of why you're here. So that's what we'll be doing in the second part of this episode. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you found it very helpful. It's been quite hard to get a broad range of numbers and create averages for each country. And I hope that the things to consider that we spoke about at the beginning of this podcast is also beginning to help you create a bit of a roadmap and getting you to ask the right questions and think about how you want to approach each clinic when you want to start your relationship with them, because that's what it will be. It will be a relationship. And your wife will appreciate very much you being able to create a short list of questions before you go and throw yourself in head first. So as always, I want the absolute best for you. I hope you got all the information that you needed from this episode, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you very much. See you then.